Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Ite Namani.
I would like to speak a little bit about the importance of remembering Prabhupada, of remembering Prabhupada's Vani and Vapu. Because we were mentioning the other day that, of the two, of course, Vani is more important. We understand that. Vani, of course, means the instructions of Srila Prabhupada, and Vapu means the physical presence of Srila Prabhupada. Well, interestingly enough, the Vapu, or physical presence of Srila Prabhupada, was also instructive to us. We were listening this morning to Bhakti Chur Maharaj's talk about Prabhupada's determination to actually fight to the very end. And that always inspires me. I mean, sometimes devotees talk about retiring at the ripe old age of 50 and setting up retirement communities, which we have nothing against, retirement communities. But Srila Prabhupada really didn't want to entertain the idea of retiring, although he talked about retiring in writing many times. But Srila Prabhupada never really retired. In fact, he would say, give me the benediction of dying like a soldier on the battlefield. And another quote from Prabhupada is, it says, we want devotees like Arjuna, not sit-down devotees. Now, of course, we sit down. We're sitting down right now. And then another quote is that, when a devotee asked to take shelter at Srila Prabhupada's lotus feet, Prabhupada said, my feet are always moving. So, we can come up with so many quotes about this that really this is a movement. Prabhupada even called it the Hare Krishna movement. He didn't call it the Hare Krishna organization, Hare Krishna bureaucracy, Hare Krishna social structure, Hare Krishna foundation. He called it the Hare Krishna movement because he wanted things to move. If you don't move, in other words, unless you increase, you're increasing, you're going to decrease. You're going to end up as an anachronism. You're going to end up as completely irrelevant to society. So Prabhupada wanted us to keep moving, to keep expanding. Prabhupada's vision was not simply a little vision, a few devotees chanting Hare Krishna and a few farm communities and temples around the world. Prabhupada's whole vision was to create a revolution in the misdirected lives of an impious civilization. As the Bhagavatam verse tells us, Tadvad Visargo Janataga Viplo Yasman Pradishlokam Abadavachapi Namananantasha Yasho Nikataniya Trinvanti Gayanti Grenanti Yat Sadavaha. That this Bhagavatam is meant to create, Bhagavatam and Krishna Katha and Prabhupada's mission, they're all the same, is meant to create a revolution in the lives of a misdirected civilization. So the way we can change, there's two ways of changing the whole world, and one of them is most important, that we ourselves become fit instruments for Prabhupada. Now, having good sadhana, really attached to the holy names, chanting nicely, because you're not going to change the whole world just by some material management adjustment. It has to come from spiritual potency, as stated in the Caitanya Charitamrita. Krishna Shakti Vinanahi Tari Pravartana. That's nice. That without Krishna Shakti, then Krishna consciousness can't be spread. And so I'm going to tell a little story about my own interactions with Prabhupada that illustrates how the potency of Krishna consciousness can make people Krishna conscious. It goes back many years ago, before anybody here was born. Once upon a time, I was in Maya. Still am, but anyway. So once upon a time, I was in illusion, and I was listening to the radio. Just like any other nonsense person. I was listening to the radio, the top 10 of the whatever hit parade, whatever they had in the 1960s. And all of a sudden, I heard Prabhupada chanting on the radio. I didn't know it was Prabhupada. I didn't know. All I heard was this person going, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And immediately, I didn't know anything about Hare Krishna at that point. Immediately, my life changed. I mean, I didn't put on a dhoti, shave my head. I mean, that took some time. But immediately it changed. When I heard it, I just thought, what is this sound? And then I kept my radio on with my tape recorder. In those days, they had reel-to-reel tape recorders, not, your tiny MP3 players and stuff like that. And I kept it on for like 24 hours, waiting until the song came on again so I could record it. I mean, I didn't know what it was. That shows the potency of Krishna consciousness. So I kept it on, and finally it came on again. And they said, these are the Hare Krishnas, chanting Hare Krishna. Anyways, and I recorded it, and I kept playing it again and again. And guess what? I gave up eating meat. I mean, I didn't even know what was happening. This is the potency of a pure devotee. So I gave up eating meat. I started, I was already following the other regulated principles. And I somehow or other became attached to the chanting of the Hare Krishna. I didn't even know what the chanting was at that point. About 6 months later, someone gave me a Krishna book. And I read about some little blue boy stealing butter and feeding it to monkeys. I didn't even know who he was. But Prabhupada's potency was so great that I couldn't get the thought of that little blue boy out of my mind. I said, I'm going crazy. Little blue boy? Who's blue? Who's ever seen a blue kid except someone dying of asphyxiation or something like that? And I couldn't get him out of my mind, and then I was thinking like that, and then finally I came in contact with the devotees, but I said, no dhotis. I don't want to wear something like that. I don't want to shave my head. I had a long beard, hippie guy, so. And then, actually, it was funny. When I did join the temple, Nanda Maharaj said to me, he was a householder at that time, he shaved my face. He said, I can see you for the first time. So, you were hidden behind all that hair. So, and then it was meeting Prabhupada in 1971 that got me to do what I didn't want to do, shave my head, wear a dhoti, and move in the temple, wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do all these other things. So it was directly Prabhupada's potency that really entered into my heart, as described in the Bhagavatam by Lord Kapiladev, Bhavanti Ritkarna Rasayana Kata Tajoshanadashu Apavarga Vartmani Shradharatira Bhakti Anukramishati Satam Prasangam. So, in order to carry forward, the reason I'm telling these stories, in order to carry forward Prabhupada's mission, to be Prabhupada's soldiers, Prabhupada said military discipline, soldiers, we have to have that potency. And Prabhupada will act through us if we stick very tightly to Srila Prabhupada's instructions and to please Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada expected us to do miracles. Because that's the active principle in spiritual life, is the order of the Guru. And I mentioned the other night that when I read the introduction to the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that Prabhupada wrote, Prabhupada kept emphasizing this, how he was completely dedicated to the order of his Guru. The success potency is there in the order of his Guru. And so this is, to me, this is the point. That to understand Prabhupada's instruction and his mood, one of the means is by hearing about Prabhupada. We should be so greedy to hear about Prabhupada's activities because Prabhupada is our role model. Not just to hear in the sense that, oh, it's so interesting, like we hear so many stories. No. The reason Prabhupada did these things, acted in such a way, I mean, it was obviously his pure devotion, but one of the main reasons was to set an example for us, Acharya, setting an example for us, what it means to be Krishna conscious. Ekeha Kurananda, dedicated to the order of his spiritual master. I'll tell you a very interesting story. I mean, it's like something from the Caitanya Charitamrita, that I used to walk on the beach with Prabhupada in Los Angeles. And what I would do is I would walk behind Prabhupada and take the sand from his footprints and eat the sand from his footprints. Because it's mentioned in the Caitanya Charitamrita, the foot bathing water, the prasadam remnants, and I used to steal the prasadam remnants too.
Dust from the lotus feet.
dust from the lotus feet, or the sand from the lotus feet. Same thing, it's a dust. And, another time, so we should be greedy. Of course, this is when Prabhupada is physically present. Another time I arranged a reception for Prabhupada in Dallas, Texas, 1972 or 73. And I grabbed the plate after we offered Prabhupada in the VIP room there. And I grabbed it, and I wouldn't share it with any of the other devotees. I basically ate everything, the orange peels, the grape stems, and I would have eaten the plate, too, had it not been metal. So the same greed that I had back then, we should have for hearing about Prabhupada and understanding Prabhupada's mood. That's the point. Greed, intense hankering, loyum. That's the price for pure devotional service. Not simply, I want to be a gopi, I want to be a gopi, I want to be a gopi. That's not our method, according to Prabhupada. Our method is Yasha Prasada, Bhagavat Prasada, Yasha Prasada, Nalagati Katopi. Not only by pleasing, but I'm enthused. I want to please. My whole life is dedicated to pleasing. I'm greedy to pleasing Prabhupada. And that's the loyum that will get us to the pure devotional platform and enable us to save the whole world.
So then we went to the airport to meet Prabhupada. And the airport is where I actually grew up. It's a town called Kenner. And it's the New Orleans International Airport, but it's actually in Kenner, Louisiana. So that was my neighborhood. That's where I grew up. And so I was familiar with the airport. I went there. All the devotees were congregating, waiting for Prabhupada to arrive. We found out he was coming on Concourse C. We knew the gate and everything. So a god brother came up to me, and I was Bhakta Vic. He said, "Bhakta Vic, give me your shoes." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Give me your shoes." So I looked down, and he had his dhoti and his kirtan on. I was dressed in karmi clothes. I hadn't joined the temple. And he had his dhoti, kirta, and red cowboy boots. So I looked down, and I said, "I'm not giving you my shoes," because I knew I was going to get stuck with those red cowboy boots. So he, they're saying you should see yourself a fool in front of your spiritual master, but you don't want to look like a fool. Anyway, so this devotee actually led the kirtan, right, and led one of the most ecstatic kirtans as Prabhupada was exiting the airport. But when I heard the gate, I immediately went down. I was the first one down there. And so I was the last one to follow Prabhupada out. So we're all anticipating Prabhupada comes. Immediately, when Prabhupada comes off the plane, everyone pays the obeisances. Well, I pay my obeisances, and then I just jump up because I want to see Prabhupada. And he, as a lot of devotees have said, they were surprised at his stature. He wasn't very tall. But to me, Prabhupada, his physical height really didn't, stun me as much of his aristocracy. He was so aristocratic. And the way he held his head and everything was so regal about him. So we're exiting, we're walking down out the corridor. The Mahendranatha's leading this ecstatic kirtan. I think he was barefoot because he had ditched his boots. And as we're leaving, as I said, I'm the last one now because I was the first one there. I'm the last one. And I'm watching everything. I'm watching Prabhupada exit. I'm watching all the devotees follow him. And there was a policeman there, and I knew him. He was actually, his brother and my uncle were very good friends. And because of all the noise of the kirtan, he was trying to get the devotees to stop. But all the devotees were in front of him, and he was behind them going like this. So he looked like he was part of the kirtan. He just looked like he was participating in the kirtan. Prabhupada didn't even notice him. Prabhupada just walked out the door. And then once everyone was out, he was fine. He was over his tantrum, but he looked like he was part of the kirtan. So that was meeting Prabhupada at the airport. And then Prabhupada went to New Orleans. They had Guru Puja. And then he didn't give a class that day. He gave class the next day at New Talavan, gave Bhagavatam class. But that evening, he had a darshan. And that was truly, I guess you could say, my Moments Association. I literally was able to sit right across from Srila Prabhupada, closer than what we are, for the entire darshan. And as we were waiting to go up to his quarters for the darshan, Nityananda, who was the temple president, came up to me, because I used to ask a lot of questions in class. And so he came up to me and he goes, Bhakta Vic, you asked the first question. Well, I was shocked. I didn't expect that. I wanted to ask Srila Prabhupada some questions, but I didn't really want to be put on the spot. So there I am. I said, well, I better do it. He's asked me to do it. So we go up for the darshan. I remember Brahmananda was sitting next to me. And there was a number of devotees in the room. In fact, one of the guests was my aunt. And she was older. We were young at the time. She was much older than us. So she had back problems. So she was sitting against the wall with her back against the wall, and she had her legs out. And Prabhupada looked at her and said, sit properly. Just like he says, when you hear when Prabhupada's chanting japa and you hear it, sit properly. So he told her to sit properly. So her legs were almost like a machine. She just then went into the lotus position, but was sitting properly. After the entire darshan, after everything was over, this was her statement. She said, that was the closest I felt to God in my entire life. So she was actually fortunate enough to get Prabhupada's association, that one darshan. In that Moments Association, it was, for me, it was like time stood still. To this day, I can't tell you how long it was, if it was an hour, if it was an hour and a half. I really don't know. It was because it was as if time stood still. And so it was time I had to ask a question. So I asked Srila Prabhupada, I said, back then, of course, I had been visiting the temple for 3 years. There was that subtle pressure always there, moving to the temple. The college education was really Maya. So I asked Prabhupada, should everyone move into the temples? Prabhupada's response was, what for? Very pragmatic. What for? And I said, to live here. And his answer was, we do not object, but who is coming? So often as devotees have gotten instruction or have gotten answers from Prabhupada, they reflect on these answers, these instructions for many years. So myself, I actually took that after some time, that Prabhupada wanted me to move into the temple. So I actually finished my education, graduated, and I literally went from the graduation ceremony to sleeping on the brahmachari ashram floor the same night. And the next day I was out selling incense. But that's basically how I came initially to move into the temple.
And the fact is, as soon as Nityananda said he's coming, and that was a long time ago, I don't know, a week or so before, we just got all excited, and the whole mode changed at New Taliban. We all became very nice devotees, for that short period of time, But I remember that they really did have the great desire to let us see Prabhupada. Satsvarup was, really trying hard. Upendra finally got through, and that was at the farm. When he came to the farm, I remember I was growing these mango trees, which was a fruitless thing. Prabhupada would always said, whatever grows in that area, And the Chaitanya Charitamrita also, we learned that whatever the produce in that area, that's what Lord Chaitanya wanted. So here I am trying to put an Indian mango in New Taliban's soil, and the freezing was just no go. The soil was no go. But I got one out of so many, 20 or so, that lived through a freeze, and it was right there. It was only about 6 or 7 feet tall, but it was so thin. And when Prabhupada's Cadillac came in, his left front tire went right on it, just cracked. And I thought, wow, now I don't have to put a bonnet over it and the heating pots and keep it warm all the winter. It was a relief, actually.
I was having a lot of doubts. I was still selling spiritual sky incense, but I was a brahmachari. And I was, agitated by sexual desire. I was thinking I'm doing the wrong thing. If I have to be a brahmachari, I got to do something that's better for brahmachari life, because it's just not working right for me, I was thinking. And I was really full of doubt, and I knew doubt in my own self, not in Prabhupada, and not in Krishna at that time. But at that time I had evolved to being a devotee a little bit, I wasn't no longer a Mayavadi, but I was actually trying to be a devotee, but I had understood how and what serious, dilapidated spiritual condition I was in. I was possessed of demoniac qualities and really had a long way to go to cultivate divine qualities. Anyhow, I had all this doubt in my mind. And I was in the Caitanya Charitamrita class. There was an ecstatic kirtan, and the old Dallas temple was upstairs, where they have a hall now. And there was ecstatic kirtan. Radha Kalachandri up at the front. Prabhupada's Vyasasana was in the back. And the devotees were just ecstatic. But I was just stuck to the floor with my own self-absorption and my own doubts, and was hoping Prabhupada could relieve me. Somehow maybe if I could catch his eyes or something, he could relieve me of this terrible situation I was feeling. So class came, everybody was sitting down. I must have been 30 or 40 feet from Srila Prabhupada, sitting on the right-hand side of his Vyasasana. And he spoke from a Caitanya Charitamrita verse, which could be found. It was recorded. But at one point he was speaking about just take shelter of Radha Madana Mohan. I suppose the verse was about Radha Madana Mohan. So when questions and answers came, I thought, well, I'm not going to get a chance any other way to meet with Prabhupada, because generally speaking, the older devotees would tell the younger devotees, don't bother Prabhupada with your Maya. And Prabhupada's got too much to do, just talk to one of the senior devotees. It's just the same old thing, either sex desire or this problem or that problem. So I didn't try to write a letter, and I tried to see Prabhupada, but it wasn't much opportunity. So I thought I better take the opportunity to ask a question. But at the same time, I didn't want to expose my ignorance, my false ego too much. So I wanted to ask a question, but I was like stuck in suspended animation. I just couldn't get anything out my mouth. But Srila Prabhupada literally turned, like if I was sitting on the Vyasasana here, he literally turned like this and went, yes. And so then I said, and I don't have the script in front of me, I transcribed it from my memory. I said, Srila Prabhupada, what do you mean by just take shelter of Radha Madana Mohan? You mean just take shelter of the deities? And Srila Prabhupada went on to quote that famous verse from the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam that Prahlad Maharaj speaks, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padanam, Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Sakyam Atma, Nivedanam. Quoted the whole verse very nicely. And then he spoke, the lotus feet of the Lord are none different from devotional service. So take shelter of any one of these non-processes, at least one of them. Anyhow, the doubt left my heart. I felt pretty secure. I said, I can go home. I don't have to go out and sell incense. I can simply chant Hare Krishna and be a brahmachari. But after a couple of months of doing that, I went out and sold spiritual sky incense.
Before meeting Srila Prabhupada, I was already married 2 times, had 3 little children, and divorced, a single mom with 3 little kids. And really, I was so frustrated with material life, I didn't know whether to kill myself or commit myself. And then by the intervention of the Lord, I met devotees. I moved to a temple in Dallas, and Srila Prabhupada saved me. So, then the first time I actually met him was in Los Angeles. He was there a lot, so I was very fortunate to get to see him giving classes regularly, coming in for greeting of the deities. He's in the old temple room in New Dwarka. He would walk past the devotees after greeting the deities, and I handed him an apple, and my hand brushed his hand, and his skin was so soft. I've never felt anything like that in my life, then, before, or since then, that can compare. It just was amazed to me, you know, to feel that. Another time, when Prabhupada would give classes in New Dwarka, the women all sat upstairs. This was now in the new temple room. The women all sat upstairs in the balcony, and you know, all the men and the Vyasant was over here, and the deities were over here. And I got upstairs one morning, and I thought, well, I can hardly see Prabhupada from here, so I'm going to get a good view. So I decided to climb over the rail and out onto the little balcony that was, you know, out there. And I was sitting there thinking, wow, I got a great view now. And Prabhupada looked there, get down. And I was, and you know, so they were motioning me to get down and everything, and I got down, but I was feeling like really, really upset that Prabhupada had to chastise me like that I was so stupid that I would put myself out there, and then he's right there looking at me, get out from there like you idiot. So I was so upset to have gotten chastised by Srila Prabhupada. I went around all morning feeling so stupid until one Prabhu told me that it is all mercy, whether we get praise or chastisement from the spiritual master. That eased the pain somewhat, but I never did that again.
So the first time I saw Srila Prabhupada, it was full of awe, reverence, and totally shocked to see such a reverential gentleman. I was in need of following an authority figure. I was not essentially looking for a spiritual master, but I was looking for like a second father. I lost my father at a very early age from the military, and Srila Prabhupada represented that to me at first hand. I had no incentive to to get involved with spiritual life, but by the urgings of my dear godbrother and associating with devotees, I later developed that enthusiasm in Krishna consciousness.
I first met devotees in Honolulu. I believe I first saw them in 1971. There was 2 Sankirtan parties. On one side of the street, they had dhotis and kirtas and saris and shaved heads and were playing kartals, mridanga, and harmonium. And on the other side of the street was Siddha Sarup's people. At that time, Chris Butler. And they had aloha shirts, long hair, and guitars, but they were saying the same song. But I never really, thought about it. I saw them in Honolulu, and then several months later, I was living on Maui, in a commune there called Banana Patch, and some friends invited me to go to the Krishna Center. There was a devotee named Govardhan there, and Jim Titcomb. That's all I remember, those 2. And we went there. I was a complete fruitarian at the time. anyway, I don't want to talk about myself, but you asked how I met devotees. So I was a complete fruitarian, so we'd go to the chanting, and the chanting was nice, and we'd sit down, and everything was served on banana leaves, and they'd come around with the prasadam, and I said, no, I'm just here for the good vibes, you know, and they said, oh, no, this is all good vibes, and I say, I'm a fruitarian, and oh, this is pure fruit, we just picked it, it was like cornmeal halva, you know, but yeah, we just picked it off the trees, you know, 'cause they did anything to distribute prasadam, so, you know, I took it, yeah, that was great, never had this fruit before, but it was, you know, it was nice getting prasadam. And then I remember one day I was hitchhiking, and Govardhan picked me up. And then he stopped to take a japa walk at this beach park called Hukipa Beach. It's a big surf spot on the north shore of Maui, northeast shore. And we're going for a walk up on this hill, and there's a big cliff, down below is the ocean and all the surfers. And so he's chanting japa, so I took my book out, Autobiography of a Yogi I was reading, and you know, he's chanting japa, and I'm reading my book, and then it's like, oh, what book you reading? And he took the book, and he said, oh, Autobiography of a Yogi, and he took it, and he threw it over the cliff into the ocean. And he said, the book just merged into the ocean. So anyway, that was my first experience with devotees, how they're kind of fanatical a little bit.
I had just gotten out of high school, and I met Keshava, old Keshava Das Karandar's brother, through another friend, his old friend, and he spoke to me. We got together on the yoga topic one night, and we stayed up all night speaking about Krishna consciousness, and by the morning time I was a vegetarian and was chanting Hare Krishna and had a big stack of books and chanted for some time, and he encouraged me to chant more. So I started chanting 16 rounds, and then I was able to actually read Bhagavad Gita. It kind of turned on when I started chanting 16 rounds. I couldn't read it before. I was just foreign. So it turned on, and it just answered all my questions, and I just felt like I had to find if there was anybody who was living this Bhagavad Gita, because it was the only thing that ever made any sense, and it made the most sense, and I was, you know, totally inspired by it. And then we went back to my house and sold all my stuff, and I bought a new car, new used car, and we drove to LA to see Prabhupada, specifically because he was getting ready to come back from, I think, Fiji and Hawaii and then Los Angeles. And, you know, just being with all the devotees as Srila Prabhupada would come down out of his room to go on the walk, everybody would greet him, and it was so wonderful. So one morning right after that, after we greeted Prabhupada and walked him, you know, to his car, just watched him walk to the car where he got in for the morning walk. I don't know why we were standing by my car, but it was right next to where, it was that little parking lot that was right off the temple there, heading towards towards Venice Boulevard. All of a sudden, Brahmananda Maharaj comes running out of the temple. He had missed the walk. So he comes out and he's looking around, and he sees me and Keshava standing over by my little Ford Cortina station wagon. Is this your car? And I said, yes, it is. He says, let's go. So he jumps in the front seat, and Keshava jumps in the back, and I drove it. And we're racing down the street, and, you know, it's pretty early at that time of the day, and I don't know what day it was, but he goes, don't stop at the lights, just hurry up, you know, we got to catch up to Prabhupada. So I'm running all the lights, you know. And I don't remember which beach we went to. I don't know, because back then the parking lots may have been different or something, if it was Venice or if it was a little further north, I don't know. Santa Monica. Maybe it was Santa Monica. And so anyway, he runs out there, and I've listened to the morning walk several times. Prabhupada was wondering, where's Brahmananda? So Brahmananda comes running up, and Prabhupada says, so, you're late today. And Brahmananda says, well, you left a little early today. And everybody says, yeah, Prabhupada, you left 10 minutes early. Prabhupada said, no, your watch is slow. They were joking, you know, it was really funny. Very beautiful, humorous pastime there with Brahmananda.
I was able to go with Srila Prabhupada on
a lot of morning walks and help with darshans as the doorman. A lot in Chicago and Detroit. So one of the morning walks in Evanston, we walked along the lakefront with Srila Prabhupada. And I was younger than most of the devotees, and I was still probably shorter than them. I grew slow. And a lot of those devotees were pretty tall. And I was trying to, Prabhupada would walk real fast. And what I was getting was a lot of knees and elbows from big, tall, bony devotees, and I wasn't even fully grown. So I was getting a lot of this. Oh, excuse me. So at the end of the walk, I had listened to a lot of tapes of Prabhupada morning walks. So somehow I decided to ask him a question, even though I was really, looked like a little kid. I looked a lot younger than 18, honest. I was 19, I think. And so I decided to do it. And I felt nervous, and I got up there somehow, right, because I was going to the car, and I said, Srila Prabhupada, what happens to devotees that join the temple and then they leave? And Prabhupada stopped the whole party, and he looked right at me, and I'm looking behind Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, Brahmananda Maharaj, Satsarup Maharaj, and Prabhupada just stared at me, is this close or closer? And Prabhupada says, explain? And I couldn't explain it, and I felt like I was going to faint. And I was trying to go like this, don't faint, don't faint. And then what happened was, I said, Prabhupada, these devotees get initiated even as Brahmins, and then they leave, they go away. What's going to happen to them? Because I knew Arjuna asked Krishna that question. I didn't want to ask something foolish. So I knew it was a bona fide question, because it came from Bhagavad Gita. And I love Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada said, I said, what happens to the devotees? And Prabhupada's reply, after he said explain, I explained it. He said, that is the fault of the recommender, which is like not what I expected for him to say. And then he just looked at me, and I couldn't understand exactly what that meant. And I said, you mean the temple president recommended them for initiation? He goes, yes. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj standing right there, and he said, Arjuna asked Krishna that, and Krishna says that you take birth in a high family or family of great devotees or wealthy people. And Prabhupada said yes. And later, Tamal Krishna Maharaj told me that Prabhupada was very upset with a lot of people getting initiated that really weren't qualified to get initiated.
So towards the end of 1973, Prabhupada was in transit. He was either going from Los Angeles to London or coming back from London going to Los Angeles, and he was just stopping over in New York one day. I don't think it was a really scheduled visit because we only heard about it that morning. So in the morning they announced Prabhupada will be here this afternoon, and he's going to give the Bhagavad Gita class, and everybody should make sure they're back in time for Prabhupada's class. So I was going out in Sankirtan. I think I was at Port Authority bus station, and we stopped in enough time to come back for Prabhupada's class. Prabhupada gave a Bhagavad Gita class on the fourth chapter, text 13, Chaturvana Mayasrastam. So at the end of the class, Prabhupada asked for questions. And there was a couple of questions, 2, maybe 3, definitely 2. And then after the 2 questions, Prabhupada said, so are there any more questions? And nobody raised their hand. I said, okay. And then Prabhupada said it again. He said, are there any more questions? And nobody raised their hand. And then at that point, I was still not initiated. I was living in the temple about 6 months, but there was plenty of devotees there who had been 2, 3 years like that. So I was thinking to myself, come on, somebody ask a question. It's obvious. I was thinking, it's obvious that Prabhupada wants to continue speaking. Somebody ask a question. And but nobody raised their hand. And I guess I don't remember even if I consciously thought this, if it was just like a knee-jerk reaction, but Prabhupada asked again, are there any more questions? So I didn't have a question. At least I didn't have one formulated in my mind. But I was feeling uncomfortable. I felt like, this is ridiculous. Somebody should ask a question. Prabhupada wants to continue speaking. So I just raised my hand, and they called on me. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, could you say something about the mercy of Lord Caitanya? Not even a proper question, really, because I didn't have a question. And he was sitting on the Vyasasana, and he was sitting like in a very relaxed position. And he leaned over to Shruti Kirti. Yeah, Shruti Kirti. And he said, I could kind of hear softly, and picked up the movement of his lips. What did he say? I guess I didn't speak up loudly and clearly enough. So Shruti Kirti leaned over to Prabhupada and repeated something to him. Whether he repeated exactly what I said or formulated it as a proper question, I don't know. And I will never know, because I asked Shruti Kirti, subsequent to that, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, if he remembered. He didn't even remember the whole incident. And that class was not recorded, so I'll never know. But anyway, he repeated something to Prabhupada. And after he did that, Prabhupada, as I said, was sitting very relaxed. And then all of a sudden, he just sat up very straight, really straight. And he said, it is already said, Padam, and with his hands and everything, he said, Padam Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. So continue doing Sankirtan and you'll be victorious. And that was it. He just, shot that out there like that. And then I was kind of like stunned, to be honest with you, because I thought, whoa, what happened? What happened? Did I just get chastised, or what just happened here? And I didn't know what to make of it. And then that was the end of the class. He didn't ask for any more questions. And then devotees approached me afterwards, and they said, oh, congratulations, Bhakta Jeff. I said, what, congratulations? What do you mean? They said, yeah, you just got a personal instruction from Srila Prabhupada. So I said, oh, okay. And ironically enough, that's been my service. I'm still, that's my service, Sankirtan. And pretty much I've been in the movement now 43 years, 3 months, and at least 90% of the time I've been doing Sankirtan. So I don't know if it was like a blessing, or I don't know. It's hard to. I know that I have thought about that on at different points in time, and just I reminded myself, well, Prabhupada said, just continue doing Sankirtan, you'll be victorious. And there have been a lot of turning points when I just remembered that instruction and decided, well, I don't know if really how significant it is, but Prabhupada did say that to me, so let me continue doing that, and I have, and I'm still here. So anyway, so maybe there's something to that.
Whenever we were young and getting initiated, if you had your name started with an M or an R or an S, you got a name starting with that. So everybody that had a name with M, which is my name was Marion, got a Maha this or a Maha that, right? So I don't want a Maha name. So I saw, after I got initiated and got the name Mohanasini, which I like that name, I saw my name had been Maharani and had been scratched out and written Mohanasini beside it. And so I've always really loved that name and appreciated that Prabhupada gave me a wonderful name. What I learned from that was that Srila Prabhupada knows us through and through better than we know ourselves, obviously. And he knows how to fan that spark. And he fortunately didn't give up on me, because I was a silly, foolish girl, and I'm still here after 45 years and happily distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, and grateful to be in the Association of Devotees.
Prabhupada teachings, reading his books, actually turned my life over. When we see, and the engagement or association of the devotees is also there, but the actual spiritual strength, it was, coming from the first canto, first part, and I happened to read it, and I was in YMCA somehow or other for some days, and I finished the first volume, and it was so potent. My father brought it from a garbage can in Rockefeller Center during the Christmas time, because devotees were freely distributing, shoving in the throats, they call it. So the Srimad Bhagavatam, he picked up. He didn't read it, but I read, and I was convinced. Then I convinced him, and he took initiation too. Both my parents were initiated. Anyway, that was a later story. But the idea is that the potency of conviction on the absolute truth was in Srimad Bhagavatam. The Mahatmya of Srimad Bhagavatam, everything is so much explained by Srila Prabhupada in his purports, and I got convinced from that point.
But as soon as I came here, and I heard about the Prabhupada, and the devotees were talking about him, and I saw and I read his book, Bhagavad Gita and Teachings of Lord Caitanya, then and then I decided he is my Guru, no matter what, this life or next life. That was the decision. And the way I have seen him, I had never seen anybody else like that. His, innocent face. He had no motive behind that. His only motive is to help people. And that's what I see. And I had never seen those things in anybody else. So that was my determination. Srila Prabhupada is my Guru.
So then, another question I asked Srila Prabhupada, being brought up in Catholicism, everybody wants to be certain about their salvation, so to speak. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't, doing anything offensive towards Lord Jesus. So I was going to church, and then I would go to the temple, and so on and so forth. So I asked Prabhupada specific questions in relation to being Catholic, going to church, and so on. I asked Prabhupada about the miracle that Lord Jesus supposedly fed thousands of people or hundreds of people fish. So I asked Prabhupada, Lord Jesus supposedly fed so many people fish. And he just very pragmatically said that may be so. But he said, he pointed that on the table, Prabhupada was sitting like where you are, and I was much closer than this. There was a small table. And there was a big bowl of fruit on the table. And he pointed to the fruit. He says, why do we have to eat fish? He says, when we have so many nice fruits and vegetables, why do we have to do it? So very pragmatic, not condemning that Lord Jesus did that, time, place, and circumstance. He had to feed them something. There was nothing else, so he fed them fish. So that was one of my questions. Then another question I asked Srila Prabhupada, because I was pursuing that consciousness of trying to wanting the Krishna consciousness movement, you could say, to encapsulate Christianity or try to help Christians be more realized. So I was wanting to ask him about meat eating and the fact that the Pope, the bishops, they all eat meat. So I started my question. I said, Srila Prabhupada, the Pope, the bishops, they, how do you convince them? I was going to say not to eat meat. And before I could finish, he said, first you become convinced. So such a nice instruction again, because he could see the challenges I guess I was having with Christianity, and well, the word back then was surrendering, or at least becoming more devoted to Krishna Bhakti. So as the years go by, I think of that instruction. First you become convinced. And it's true, the more we're convinced, the more Srila Prabhupada was so convicted, so convinced of spreading Krishna consciousness. And, at the same time, us coming through from whatever religious background we had all these things in our hearts, all these doubts, whatever they were. But it's because of Srila Prabhupada that all of us steadily became more and more convinced of that blue boy, that's God. So that was another question I asked Srila Prabhupada. Then as the darshan went on, I distinctly remember there was someone sitting behind me, and he had a turban on. He was American, but he had a turban. So I don't know if he was practicing some form of Sikh religion or what, but he would ask questions in this vein. Can you speak to us of this? And so he asked Prabhupada a few questions, but at one point he asked Prabhupada, he said, can you speak to us of love? And Srila Prabhupada immediately responded, Krishna is love. And then he elaborated on that statement. Then, at some point in time, this gentleman stood up. Now, he was behind me, so I didn't know he stood up. Well, he was standing up to leave. And Prabhupada's voice during the whole darshan was very normal. It was like a steady voice. But as this gentleman stood up to leave, all of a sudden Prabhupada said, where are you going? And it just shocked me, it stunned me. I couldn't move. Prabhupada's voice was so powerful. And the gentleman explained that he had a previous engagement that he had committed to, and that he had to go honor that commitment. So Prabhupada, from that loud, powerful, startling voice, he turned to Nityananda, and he, in a voice that was filled, I can't describe it any other way, but it was filled with so much love and compassion that, he just said 4 simple words, and he said, give him some prasadam. But my voice can't duplicate the love and compassion he had. And I could see, just from that one, it just moved me so much. And once again, the realizations over the years, and that's all Prabhupada wanted, was to give us Krishna in some way. He always wanted to, in fact, in his books, he says, no event is complete without distribution of prasadam. But from the tone of his voice, I could see he had so much love and compassion for every living entity. And he just wanted to give that to us somehow or other. And he was going to make sure that every single individual in that room got prasadam before they left. So these are just simple stories from that one time frame, that little bit of time I was with Prabhupada, that I can remember at this point in my life. I've meditated on them a lot, and I've also, gotten a lot of realizations from it. And you could say that moment's association has sustained my Krishna consciousness this lifetime. I just want to somehow or other, help other living entities become Krishna conscious. And it's because of everything Srila Prabhupada has given us.
It was very difficult to go on a morning walk. It was only 10 or 12 devotees. So certainly if you weren't initiated, there's no chance. But there was a devotee in the temple. His name is Arjuna. I remember him and thank him very much. He said, I just get in the car, we're going. So he got in his car and he's running red lights, everything he can to catch up. And Prabhupada would walk on, I believe it was right on Waikiki Beach, might be called Almoana. It's the beach that he walked on every day. The famous beach where he looked out and said the sufferers when he saw the surfers. But on that walk, one of the devotees who was a temple commander in Honolulu, he was complaining to Prabhupada, Prabhupada, we have some devotees, you know, they just want to, like, you know, read Krishna book all day. And Prabhupada said, oh, very nice, very nice. And they said, no, Prabhupada, you don't know what I mean. They don't want to do any service, but they're just reading Krishna book all day. That's very nice, reading. No, but they're not doing service, like helping in the temple. And then Prabhupada says, yes, when you are in the hospital, you have to follow the doctor's instructions. So we have to, you know, we have this sadhana, we have to maintain these temples, we have to distribute books. I mean, if you're living in the temple, that's what Prabhupada expected. He didn't want people just to, even though reading, we all have to read the books. That's what he printed them for. He didn't just print books so we can sell them. He wanted devotees to read them and understand them. But he also wanted his temples to be maintained. They were his temples. He wanted them to be taken care of.
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada went on a morning walk. And we left the brick house temple, and we walked towards the barn where little Bhakti Vimal, who was about, I think about 4 or 5 at that time, was feeding a calf to a bottle with a big nipple on it. And it was having a hard time. The calf was knocking the bottle around, and he was not really able to take care of it very, very well, struggling with this little calf. And Prabhupada said, at his age in India, take care of 50 calves. So that was, oh yeah? Oh, well, maybe he wouldn't be able to. We didn't know about what, but yeah, man, we need to learn some things about the farm. 50 calves, how can any child like that take care of 50 calves? So that was a lesson to learn later. Anyway, so, you know, we went, also, before we got there, he asked if it was just a really nicely mowed lawn, and it was real, he says, is there any ants? And I think some devotee pointed, yeah, Prabhupada, there's a mound over here, but it's way off the way. But if there's a mound, then there's trails of ants. So he just walked all the way around on the dirt road, so he wouldn't step on an ant. And then we went around in front of the barn there for Bhakti Vimal. After that, we took off and went on across the road to where the cows were, passing the garden, which didn't exist, which was not good. But we got on the other side where the cows were. We had built a shed for the machinery. We had, in my memory, it was a hay baler, a hay cutter, a forage harvester, a grinder, pounder, blower into silos kind of thing, all kind of stuff, and 2 tractors. And all that stuff was still in the rain because although the wooden framework was there in the wall on the backside, there was no roof yet. And Prabhupada asked about the machines. And he said, they need oils. And Prabhupada said, yes, Srila Prabhupada, we're putting a roof over, you know, to protect them from the rain. And he said, but it's not finished. And then he said, and before you are finished, and he pointed to the roof, they're finished. But he wasn't happy with the machines. But it wasn't so much a criticism that we did not finish the hay barn or that shed. It was a dissatisfaction of seeing all this machinery, hoping that he was going to see something else. And I believe that what he wanted to see would be something like a garden, a cobbler, someone who could make candles, someone who presses castor bean, something along the village industry line. Because in the village industry, and what we're trying to do was not at all self-sufficiency. And not only that, but self-sufficiency can never be a target. The target is devotional service. Self-sufficiency is a byproduct. So we had a lot of problems. And with all this machinery, we were doing everything exactly like they were doing down the road. And Prabhupada said, this is exactly what they're doing down the road. And then they killed a cow. Everything's for the cow. And then they killed the cow. So this is no good. Also, Prabhupada was really critiquing us. And I could understand also, but not at that time. It was years later that I realized he wanted that village industry. That's what they don't do down the road.
So I hitchhiked back to New Orleans, and Prabhupada was coming here. When he came out to the farm, and instead of doing a morning walk, he did an afternoon walk. It was a little drizzly in the morning, very overcast. Afternoon was a little bit nice, and went for an afternoon walk. On that walk, he was talking about the cows and machinery, and I always had this aspiration to do something like Swarup Damodar and some of the other disciples, where they would play devil's advocate, or Prabhupada would play devil's advocate with him. And I wanted to do that, but I didn't want to be misunderstood, because I was just Yogendra, the brahmachari, and I didn't want people to think that, you know, I was arguing with Prabhupada about something. But at the same time, I wanted to play that role of a materialist, and Prabhupada had been talking about the cows and machinery, so I thought I'd take the opportunity to try to do something like that. And it's transcribed, it can be read if one wants to get what was actually said and done, but this is just from my memory. So I took the opportunity to ask Prabhupada a question on that walk, and I said, Srila Prabhupada, you know, you say that the cows are very important, and more important than machinery. I may not have said it like that, but I tried to pose a challenging type of question. And I mentioned that, but the cow, after the cow has done his work, and you have to feed him, you have to care for him, you know, all that is time and labor and expense. Whereas the tractor, we just park it and turn it off. Something like that. And what impressed me was not so much what Prabhupada said, but it was the tone of voice he said it in. And before I try to exemplify that to some extent, let me point out that, you know, I'm an American cowboy coming from a Malecha and Yavana background. Prabhupada is a Krishna cowboy. But, you know, I was attracted to him. I took initiation from him. I tried to be his disciple. And so I asked him this question. And now here we are, and that was 1975, 40 years later. Here I am still taking care of cows to a large degree, you know, president on a farm. And at that time, I would have never thought that that would have given me that sticking power, but I attribute it to some extent to that. So when I asked that question, I didn't know if Prabhupada was going to get infuriated and say something, you materialistic people. I didn't know how he was going to react. I didn't know if Brahmananda was going to say something or what. But Prabhupada, he turned and he looked at me just like a father. And he said, yes, but the cow is your mother, the bull is your father. And he didn't say exactly like that if you read the transcript, but he did emphasize in the transcript that the cow is your mother. And that love impressed me. That it was more about the soul than just innate matter and what we can do with technology, but there was a person trapped in that body, and that body had been given a dharma, and an important dharma. And we also had been given a dharma, and an important dharma. And Prabhupada was teaching us that. So that was a learning experience for me.
So one morning in Mayapur, I was, chanting rounds before Mangalarti. I don't know what time it was, maybe 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. And I was just circumambulating I think I was even walking around it the wrong way. Now that I think about it, I think I was walking around the temple. Normally we circumambulate clockwise. I think I was going counterclockwise. And so I chant my japa a little bit loud. So I'm walking around the corner right near Prabhupada's room, and all of a sudden Hari Sariprabhu comes over to the balcony real enthusiastically. Prabhu! I'm like, huh? He goes, you're chanting too loud and it's disturbing Prabhupada's translations. And I was like, oh no. Devastated. I was like, oh, I didn't come there to offend Prabhupada. And I was like, oh my God, what am I doing? Moron, way to chant so loud there. And so then at Mangalarti time, the Bhavananda Prabhu, who was like one of the managers there at the time, Bhavananda Maharaj then, he's making this announcement, about how we should be in the Dham. And so he said there's some devotees were saw holding hands, in front of the Dham there, and you shouldn't have any intimate contact. And somebody else was chanting so loud that he was disturbing Prabhupada's translation, so now my offense became public, So I'm really in anxiety, I'm like, oh God, I don't want to offend Prabhupada. Now I've offended him somehow, and I felt really bad. And I was like, I don't know what to do, and I was totally stressed out. So I finished the morning program, and then Guru Puja and greeting the deities come, and so Prabhupada's giving class finally after everything. So Prabhupada had his little, his route. He would come down the stairs, and they'd be singing that beautiful Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. When Prabhupada came down, that beautiful tune the Guru Kulas were singing, then he would come. So he'd always walk out that way after class. So I was standing in that area in the back of all the devotees because I didn't want to fall asleep during his class, because I fell asleep once and I was like, man, I'm not going to do that again. So I was just standing up, and Srila Prabhupada was giving a beautiful Bhagavatam class on the 7th canto and talking about Prahlad Maharaj, and about the whole purport was about the holy name. And so he's giving the class, and I'm standing, I'm in the back, so I don't know how many feet it was, at least 35 feet. I'm thinking, through all the devotees that were there. It was like, how many devotees were there then? There was thousands of devotees there. So I'm standing back over by the steps, and he's looking around the room, and when he got to my eyes, his glance went right into my eyes from that distance, and I just felt like he could first of all see everything, but on top of that, it just cleansed all the anxiety out of my consciousness, and completely, I just felt like, okay, you're not offensive, it's all right, you're forgiven, and everything, it was like kind of like this whole beautiful transcendental wave of his just looking, there's so much potency of him just looking at you. And I felt so purified and enlivened from just him saying that. But what he was saying was, when he stopped and he was talking, he said, do not think that this is a material sound vibration. It is purnam, complete and spiritual. I mean, I heard something different that was on the tape even. I heard something, one or two words that were a little bit different than when I listened to the lecture. But it was basically that it's spiritual, perfect, and complete, the holy name. And then, I was like, wow, totally satisfied, and appreciated his kindness, that there was no real offense there.
We also won the biggest court case and beautiful judgment that it is historical about our fight against lumping us into the cult, what they call. And Srila Prabhupada during that time was guiding devotees, and devotees were guiding life members how to counteract this thing. So we collected petitions and we propagated so heavily. So this kind of involvement was there, and indirectly we see that the devotees are instrument, but directly Prabhupada was instructing how to handle the court cases. I vividly remember that he sent us the message that just pile up my books on the table of the judge, and Krishna will take care. And he was exactly right. The judge was so impressed by the reviews and content of the books, and he gave Hare Krishna as an authentic bona fide religion with history of 5,000 years old, and beautiful judgment. So we became so much involved with a reciprocation of some spiritual reward, as well as material, what you call prestige through the judgment. When Prabhupada gave the idea to put up the whole Bhagavatam set and other books, on the judge's table, Toshan Krishna Prabhu and others who were in charge at that time, they really were enthused, and we were of the part of the team, but we were taking the petitions from the Indian community all over New York and New Jersey area. So Srila Prabhupada, what we call spiritual insights, that this is the entire pivot on which the judgment would depend. That the books are so potent that even a person who doesn't have any faith can generate faith, not only what to speak of faith, but to evaluate the books on the merits of authenticity and historical treatise on the Vedanta studies, and that is marvelous. I mean, full-fledged judgment in our favor. We didn't expect anything like that, but nonetheless, it's by Prabhupada's, and Prabhupada gets the credit for that. Prabhupada's mercy, that the devotees were helped out.
In 1976, I was always looking for Srila Prabhupada. I'm gonna see Srila Prabhupada. So devotees say, oh, he's not, he's in India, he's there. And anytime when I go to temple, I hear the Prabhupada step. So I immediately, oh, Prabhupada is here. So then I get discouraged when I don't see him there. But 1976, I have been told that Prabhupada is here. So in the morning, before 6 o'clock, I went to the temple on 55th Street, and the devotees were lining up in the front lobby. So I asked one of them, what's going on, why you're standing in line? He said, Prabhupada is just going to come back from morning walk, so we're going to greet him. So I said, okay, so I will also stand in line. They gave me some flower petals, and as soon as Prabhupada walked in, we threw the flower petals on him, and Prabhupada walked in, had a darshan and sit on his Vyasasana. So then everybody, all the devotees, sannyasi were trying to pay his obeisances. And so I also went. I was in a karmi dress, of course. So I went and paid obeisances, and I tried to touch Lord Prabhupada's feet. One sannyasi, hey, get out. So the Prabhupada looked at me and said, don't worry. So then I hear his class, Bhagavatam class. In that class, Prabhupada was mentioning about the Vaikuntha planets, was describing. He said, there is nothing like Vaikuntha place that you can even imagine. And at that time, what I felt is the whole atmosphere was changed in the temple room, and everybody was quiet and peace. He said, this is Vaikuntha, Prabhupada has mentioned, this is Vaikuntha. And I realized it, oh yeah, this is really Vaikuntha. And everybody was so happy and quiet. I could not even imagine what's going on. And then in the meantime, the fire brigade engine was going pee, pee, pee. So I said, this is Maya, and this is not Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha, you don't find these things.
So I just dressed Shishi Gornitai every day, and I was in the pujari room, and I knew that Srila Prabhupada came down every morning for his morning walk. So I thought, well, this would be a great time to get a close-up photo of him. So I grabbed my camera and I got in position down there at the bottom of the stairs, anticipating his arrival, but thinking that he's just going to zoom past me. So I got to be ready with that, ready to click it off right then and there, right? And so when he came down, and I'm ready, and he just stood there and posed so nicely, so beautifully. He posed for that picture. And I thought that was so gracious of him. Here he is, the Jagat Guru of the universe, but he actually took a moment to let me take that picture. So maybe some people think it's a trivial thing, but to me it meant a lot. Well, when he did that, what it meant to me was that he really cared about each and every one of us. He was not impersonal. He wasn't too busy for any of us. He cared and loved all of us and wanted all of us to feel like he was reciprocating with us on whatever, even if it was a small little thing like that. I really appreciated his behavior in that way. Me and another mother lived together, and we took turns taking care of our kids. And so we were getting initiation at the same time. Her name was Shaimaga and mine was Mohanasini. I had already gotten first initiation earlier, but not directly from Srila Prabhupada. So now we're getting ready to get second initiation from Srila Prabhupada. So my roommate and I pooled our money and got a big basket of fruit to offer to Srila Prabhupada. So when we came in the room, she went in first, the fruit basket was there, our names were on the card to Srila Prabhupada. And I was thinking before I got initiated, before I went in to see him, what does my name mean? Nobody seemed to really know. And I was going to ask him. So I bowed down, and he's looking at the fruit basket with the card on it, and he says, "Oh, you are Shaimaga?" And I said, "No, Srila Prabhupada, I am Mohanasini Dasi." And he says, "Oh, that is a very nice name." He says, "Mo means illusion, and Hanasini means destroyer of." And I thought, wow, I didn't even have to ask him. This is the only thing I was thinking to ask him. What does my name mean? And right away he's telling me in that way. So then I got sat down next to him to start learning the Gayatri mantra, and he shows me the fingering, which I could not figure out. He showed me a couple of times, still didn't really get it. Then he said, go talk to my servant, he'll show you how to do it. So I felt really stupid in front of Srila Prabhupada.
The quality that Srila Prabhupada had that impressed me the most was his compassion, because he was so qualified, and most of us were not qualified for what Prabhupada gave us in spiritual life. We were just ordinary people. It's very high knowledge, very rare opportunity to become initiated into the Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Sampradaya, as Westerners. And it's incalculable opportunity for our benefit. It's better than any money that there's no amount of money that you could make that just even come close. And Prabhupada, by his compassion, gave it to anyone who would take his instruction. If we follow his instructions, he'll let us come back to God. He'll be our link. He is our link. And that's his compassion for all of us.
If I had to choose one quality that Prabhupada had that really stands out in my mind as being, the quality that I'm most inspired by, I would have to say it's his boldness or his fearlessness. And I'll explain what I mean by that. I joined in 1973. At that time, nobody believed in reincarnation. There was people who maybe heard of it, but no mainstream educated people believed in reincarnation. Actually, there used to be, the word they used to refer to it was metempsychosis. Everybody knows what a psychosis is, it's like a mental disorder, So in other words, it was not like an idea that was very much appreciated among educated circles. So here's Prabhupada, 1973, coming out, and one of his foremost preaching points is, we're not the body. You're not this body. You're a spirit soul. And he went on to say, you're an eternal servant of Krishna, and the real purpose of human life is to revive your awareness of your... So, that was like very bold thing to present back in 1973. And something that, and I've been appreciating that more and more as time goes on. Like one of the big things Prabhupada emphasized while he was still with us was he wanted to see the materialistic scientists defeated. And some devotees took up that instruction, that mandate, and I think it was in the early 80s they produced this magazine called Origins Magazine. And one of the articles in that magazine was about consciousness. I can't remember the exact name of the article, but one of the things that was mentioned in the article was about this research that this man has conducted, starting also in the late 60s, about children who remember their past lives. And he was a scientist. He was actually the chairman of the Department of something in University of Virginia. So in other words, he conducted this research for 40 years, and then when he passed away, there's another man who's taking it up. So basically, there seems to be good quality empiric evidence to support this idea, that we are something other than just this material body. And now it's very fashionable to say, I believe in reincarnation of this, but back in those days it wasn't. Prabhupada was preaching that, not just like in a quiet way. He was like, that was his main point, one of his main preaching points, back at a time when it was incredibly unpopular, to the point where people would think you're like something wrong with you if you believe in that. Same thing with vegetarianism. But Prabhupada wasn't daunted by that at all. Prabhupada preached that very strongly. And I think it's like an amazing, for me, it's a very significant thing that it's all being bared out. And it's like now here we are 50 years later, and as far as I'm concerned, I feel I could present Krishna consciousness to any open-minded person. Any open-minded person, I could present Krishna consciousness with complete confidence and conviction, and at least get them to the point where they have to admit that this is something that's worthy of serious further consideration. I did that with my father. My father is a dyed-in-the-wool, he was a electrical engineer, but I had him, we had these kind of discussions, and I showed him, presented this evidence to him, and he had to admit that, yeah, this is interesting stuff. This is something that I have to, think about a bit more. And I've heard stories similar to that from other devotees who have parents who are from scientific backgrounds. So, I think that's like an amazing credit to Srila Prabhupada. He came with the truth. It wasn't a popular truth that he was going to present that didn't faze him in the least. He presented it, and now, as time goes on, there's going to more and more things are, falling in place, stacking up to, to show that what Prabhupada was presenting, was right.
For me, this is how it was for me. This is a kind of a subjective thing. I somehow have become attracted to wanting to meet a yogi, a real guru. And therefore I thought maybe I got to really take the chance. I was only 20 years old, and I traveled a little bit around the Southeast, but really hadn't been very far. I thought, well, I got to go to India. I got to go to the Himalayan mountains. I didn't even know if I was going to survive. And all of a sudden, this Hare Krishna movement shows up. I get back to Godhead number 37. There's Prabhupada's pictures. And it was just the picture impressed me, that he looked like a real guru. And when I read his essay, it sounded so genuine that I really thought this is a bona fide spiritual master. And even though back at that time, 1971, I was really in Mayavadi consciousness, but I had some inclination that I'm not the body, I'm the soul. And Prabhupada's heavy preaching about that. You're not the body, you're the soul. That's what I was attracted to. Sense gratification, any old animal can have. But a human being is meant for understanding the absolute truth. Now, I had a long way to go to understand that on the personal level. I was really stuck down in understanding everything is one. We're all eternal. It's all in the Jyoti, in the light. But, oh God, I had left behind with my Christian background because I just never, I guess I didn't feel satisfied and had lost my faith to some degree for various reasons. And so Prabhupada, he didn't only help me understand my soul, which was something I never could understand through Christianity. Not that there was any fault of theirs, but it never clicked with me understanding my soul. I could never really figure it out, difference between body, mind, and soul. Prabhupada helped me do that. But then later, he also helped me regain my faith in God and the personality of God just through reading his teachings. At first, when I first started to figure it out, that what it really meant, I was a little bit dismayed because I felt, wow, personal God, here I am, servant of God, and really I'm more of a demon than a devotee. So I look at all the other devotees, and I just felt somewhat dismayed because I felt that, I didn't have a lot to contribute. I really wanted to take, and here I am. I have to try to be more in the mode of goodness and shape myself up, and it looked like such a massive job. Sometimes I'd get depressed thinking about it. But Prabhupada, through his teachings and books, it really helped me to become a devotee again. And when I say again, I was somewhat of a believer in God and had a little bit of faith, but I never really knew who God was until Prabhupada came and taught us Krishna consciousness.
Being on a morning walk, I know I only went on a few, but I wouldn't want to be next to Prabhupada. And anytime he stopped and turned around, I would want to feel like I'd try to get behind someone. I just had we had this feeling that if Prabhupada, when he looked at you, he saw right through. He could see what was in your heart and your consciousness. And I thought what was in mine wasn't very clean. I didn't want him to see it. And we just knew that anything he had ever asked us to do, which is in his books, because what he gave his, and many devotees were fortunate to get personal instruction from him, go here, start a temple, do this, but just what he wrote in initiation letters and the instructions he gives in his books, we know that this is someone that he really cares about you. He didn't ask anyone to do anything for his benefit. He asked us to do things that will help us and will help the whole world. Sankirtan it's a huge austerity to go out on the street. You face, getting the door slammed in your face, things thrown at you on Harinam, but why do you do it? Because it's for our own benefit. We go to chant and we go to distribute the holy name, give the holy name and books to other people for their benefit. And that's how Prabhupada engaged us. So if we see that everything he ever asked us to do was for the benefit of everyone else on the planet, he didn't want anything for himself. Never asked for anything. So this, it's very positive. He was definitely not a selfish person. Everything he did was selfless. It was just following the instructions of his spiritual master. Das, anudas, anudasi, servant.
At the time, I was overwhelmed by, he wasn't 9 feet tall, and he wasn't blasting and giving orders like that and that. He was extremely sweet. I went in, I didn't do a dang thing for him, nothing. 4 times he said very nice to me. Now, I know it's not the chastisement, which is a real benediction, but still, it just made me feel so good. When I left, I felt like I had done some service. On analysis, I've done nothing, wasted his time. I would have asked for my time back. You're my disciple? What did you waste my time for? Be more productive. But no, he was extremely humble, extremely sweet, and he made you inspired. And that is what I've seen in all of the advanced devotees. They always make you feel better than you are. I remember when I talked to Jayananda out in Los Angeles, he was asking me for advice on the construction of the chariots. And this guy's got a degree. I have no degree. I'm an idiot. But he asked me, and I told him, I don't know. I don't know about that either. And these are really, really big axles. They ought to handle any weight. And that's about all I told Jayananda. He's got all these diagrams and mathematics and stuff down there. And he said, thank you very much, Prabhu. I really am. I'm going to stick with this. Thank you very much. You really helped a lot. And I walked out thinking, hey, I'm glad I was able to help him. And after a little while, I go, what did I do? I didn't do nothing. And that's the way the devotees would make you feel. The advanced devotees would make you feel special in your service. You go back out and you want to do more service, Anyway, that's the quality I got from Prabhupada.
The purity was just so deep and so inconceivable. It was just, that inspired me a lot. The purity inspired me a lot about Prabhupada, and the feeling that you got from being in Prabhupada's presence. I mean, the purity was a big thing. It was like the spiritual, it was instantaneous spiritual realization being with Prabhupada. I felt like, in the kirtans in particular there in Mayapur, they were very, very enthusiastic, and Prabhupada encouraged everybody. Sometimes he would move his fingers, make everybody dance. But everybody naturally, it seemed to me, was very, very enthusiastically chanting and dancing. And that also, I got a tremendous amount of spiritual realization being there in front of Prabhupada, just chanting. I felt like I wasn't the body, and I felt like I was just kind of floating and dancing through the room with no material body at all. It wasn't like an adrenaline rush. It was Prabhupada's potency just blasting me out of Maya and just giving me some kind of real spiritual perception of myself. And right after I took second initiation also, I had a similar experience. I worshipped Gaurnitai on our bus, and after offering Mangal Artik, and when I sat down to chant my rounds and prayed to Prabhupada, all of a sudden, everything just disappeared except me sitting there, and I felt like I was in a chamber with the holy name, just me and the holy name alone, and chanting and chanting, and I was so inspired. It was amazing. So Srila Prabhupada was able to, you know, give realized, instantaneous, spiritual life to the devotees. And several of my friends have confirmed that with the experiences they had where, you know, something similar happened. One devotee where they were in a place where they couldn't offer obeisances to Prabhupada. They were in Berkeley. And so my friend, Adani Aswabhavi, he saw Prabhupada looking out his window in this room, so he turned around and he very sincerely offered pranams to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada also offered pranams. He picked up his cane and offered pranams to Adani. And as soon as that happened, Adani had a similar experience with the holy name. He said he got all this amazing purity and transcendental realization of the holy name. And so Srila Prabhupada could easily bless the devotees with realization, and time again you've recorded them all and heard them all. It's an amazing phenomenon that Srila Prabhupada can easily give us this. So why should we think that we're not going to become fully realized if we're not sincere in serving Prabhupada? So that was my faith in that sense, is like I didn't need to go somewhere else or hear from somebody else or do any of that kind of stuff, because I already felt so many times on book distribution, so much realization there, and so many amazing experiences that Prabhupada gave. So I was always like, you know, he can give instantaneous God consciousness, spiritual realization. So that was kind of the thing that's kept me going all the time. Of course, now hearing, you know, now I listen to Prabhupada's classes all the time and hear, and his preaching is so phenomenal.
Sometimes he becomes stunned during giving class in New York. It says that Prabhupada was giving class and devotees were talking, that all of a sudden Prabhupada stopped and says, make preparation, or make seat for Narad Muni, he is coming. Right? The physical ecstasy, seeing the deity, that is also a sign of surrender. Then when he became totally incapacitated, yet he showed that vigor and enthusiasm and tried to push on the movement even in such what you call infirmity. Prabhupada, was absolutely in trance meditation, and was talking of preaching like a warrior. The last days he was giving instruction and translating Srimad Bhagavatam. So these are wonderful qualities. Nobody can do that. People are under bodily conception, even though they may show, but they would not, show this symptom. Prabhupada was very, very highly elevated soul. It is the supreme Paramahamsa, and we should appreciate that. We may not be able to understand this, and we cannot analyze this, but seeing such things, is absolutely marvelous. And by His grace, His divine grace, we are able to, sustain our devotional service. That is the glory of Srila Prabhupada, who is a totally surrendered soul.
I left the movement in around March 1978. I became very disillusioned, and I was very unhappy. My offenses, it was my responsibility to stay in association of devotees, and I chose not to. So eventually, after so many years of trying to run away with the Hare Krishna movement, and trying to forget Srila Prabhupada, and trying to forget all the nectar that I'd experienced in spiritual life, I got entangled really deeply. I was a career military man. I did really well in the United States Navy, achieved a high rank, and my career, my professional career was skyrocketing. There was no limit. My personal life was completely imploding. I was at rock bottom. I was at the bottom of the barrel. I was going through a very, very miserable divorce. I was coming to the point to where on weekends, my kids were visiting me in a special barracks, a special senior enlisted barracks that I was, Chief's barracks at this major military base that I was at. Basically, I had hit rock bottom. I was very depressed. I was seeking out counseling and guidance. And I was talking to a counselor one day, and she said, Bob, why don't you go out and interact more and take a college course and get involved in some type of college course and you know, start interacting, and somehow or other you can get away from some of this depression or this rut that you're in. And so I took their advice, and I took this little college course from a community college right there on this military base I was stationed at. And so one day I was doing some research in the base library. The military base had the base library, and there were books that were donated, and you know, it was a small little military library. And I was up there doing some research for a homework assignment that I had from this history class or whatever I was taking. And I was doing the Dewey Decimal System, and for some reason I was in the P's, and I was looking on this bookshelf, and I remember I saw the name Prabhupada on a book, and it caught my attention, and I grabbed the first book that I saw that said Prabhupada on it, and I brought it down, and it happened to be the teachings of Queen Kunti. And I said to myself, it might have been even out loud in the library, I know this book. And, you know, people looking around like, what's this guy talking about? And there was the Nectar of Devotion up there, and then there was a Bhagavatam. These books have obviously been distributed, and the Marines came in there and said, hey, we're going to donate this to the library. So I think that day, instead of doing my homework, I took back a Bhagavatam, definitely the teachings of Queen Kunti, and the Nectar of Devotion. I remember was there. I took them all back to my barracks, and I kept on reading them and reading them and reading them and saying, oh my God, Krishna, Prabhupada's coming back to me. He's calling me back. And I eventually I came back to the movement after that. This is Prabhupada's mercy. This is Prabhupada's mercy.
I feel strongly Prabhupada's compassion when I see the when I see the video of Srila Prabhupada on his deathbed, translating Srimad Bhagavatam for us. Not only do I see compassion, I see so many qualities, but the fact that
it's okay. Take your time.
That he sacrificed so much for us. When I can remember one other thing, that he gave he gave so much to his disciples. one time, my cousin, who's a devotee, his name is Bhrgupati, he said, you know, you can write Srila Prabhupada. So I wrote him. And I can't remember the year I wrote him. I believe when Prabhupada answered me, he was in Mayapur. So the letter I wrote was basically just a letter of appreciation. It was a simple letter. I wish I would have kept a copy because I can't remember exactly what I said. But I never once, I didn't even know Prabhupada would get the letter. I thought, well, you know, this is a shot in the dark. Prabhupada won't even get it. It's going all the way to India by post. So I didn't think Prabhupada would get the letter. And then if Prabhupada got it, I was thinking, Prabhupada's so busy, he won't have time to respond to this letter. So I actually got a response. So I have that letter framed. It's at my house. But it was Prabhupada's response, once again, was very instructive. I didn't date my letter. So he goes, my dear Bhaktivik, I'm in due receipt of your letter dated nil. So right away, I knew I should, if I'm going to correspond with someone, I should put a date on it. In actuality, I think Srila Prabhupada was the only person I ever wrote a letter to. I can't recall. I mean, nowadays we send emails all the time. That's how we communicate. But I wrote a letter to my spiritual master. He answered me, and he thanked me, and he just said, he encouraged me to continue, you know, reading and chanting, and gradually I would make some advancements. So that was so kind of him.
Je anilo premadana karuna prachu Anilo Premadonna Karuna